Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7. Nope. No. That is my review of this episode. No, I do not want to think about it. I do not. I know we're going to talk about this for another 15 minutes, but as soon as this is over, I'm just going to take a shower, cover my ears, just sing a happy song so I never have to think of this again.
This is an episode that has the fan base very divided. I went and took a look on social media, and people are either like, this is an excellent episode. It's really different than anything else that they've done. It was surprising, whatever. And then other people are just like, no, this content is just too dark and too weird.
Okay, there's so much to say about this before I do the thing where I press the button and wipe my brain of this existence. But okay, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because you know what? There's only one more episode of American Horror Stories after this, and guess what? It's almost sure to be different from this one, so there's something new to enjoy after the fact, and we'll also be covering Season 11 when that does premiere.
Also, follow us over on Instagram, Matt and Jess TV. Okay, I'm going to start this review with sort of just a disclaimer for everybody out there that doesn't know who I am or hasn't been to this channel before. I'm a former funeral director, so Sam's job, my job, except I also did everything. I took out funerals, I would do flower runs, I would transfer bodies, I would embalm, I would do a load of paperwork, which is really what funeral service is, just piles of paperwork, work with the families, all of that. So I'm going into this episode, I think, in a different mind space than probably Matt.
See, okay, here's the thing. I'm fine with funerals. I'm fine with death. I understand all of that sort of stuff. I don't think I'm particularly squeamish when it comes to that sort of thing. Granted, I don't think I could have done, your job. I don't think I could have seen dead bodies on the regular. I don't think I would handle that, but still, I can handle watching a lot of things on TV.
It's interesting because death on TV is sometimes handled really well, sometimes not. But for the most part, when it comes to this portion of it, like embalming and stuff like that, it's typically very weird and very wrong. And it's always the weirdest of the weird, creepy people are attracted to the death industry. And I'm not saying that there's nobody in the death industry that comes to it that's like the Charlie character that has, a background that kind of brings them towards death. That happens. But it's not the norm, the way that they kind of make it on TV to be all the creepiest people are going to be in university doing this, because that's not really the case. It's a really, really sort of professional, conservative looking type job. You can't go in with blue hair and piercings and be like, hey, can I help your family? They're not going to hire you on to do any of that. And that kind of weeds people who would be like a Charlie coming into the industry. And that's why you don't typically hear about these as real type stories of things that are happening. You see it on TV where, spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen Dexter New Blood. Oh my goodness, did they ever get it wrong? They're just you can embalm somebody and they last forever. I'm like, who told you this? And why are you telling other people this lie? That ain't true.
But they don't. Most TV shows, I just think they don't care, because I think they're just you know what, most people aren't going to have the knowledge that you or the other people in the funeral industry are going to have. They're not going to do the research. They're not going to understand.
I will say this, the whole beginning of this with Sam in the prep room, which is, you guys might know it as a morgue or something like that, but in the industry, it's the prep room. It really was done quite well. I mean, they had all the right equipment. She was using a porta-boy, embalming machine. She had a trocar. She was using eye caps. I mean, washing the body, doing the hair, makeup. All of that was correct. It was done really well.
Okay, see, there's a logical place to discuss this episode, and then there is a pure insanity place to discuss this episode.
Correct.
I am living in the insanity place throughout the entirety of this, just because, like, I have so many questions. Who thought of this? Why? Why did they think of this? Why did they think I needed to see this? Why was this important? Why did you have to bury them alive while they're doing things to each other at them? Just like, why? Okay. Why?
Some of this episode reminded me of a Canadian movie called Kissed. If anyone out there has seen it, let me know in the comments. It stars Molly Parker, one of my favorite actresses. That is sort of along the same lines, where you have a female embalmer who's working at the funeral home who ends up getting involved in this kind of behavior that's definitely not normal in this industry, where you're doing things to dead bodies that is not normal. I'm not saying it never happens, but I've never heard of it in all the years that I was in funeral service. It's sort of like a sensational story if it happens. Usually things that come out of a funeral service are like, there's some money things going on and people are ripping people off. And that's still even kind of rare because it's really regulated. So we have this story with Sam, and she's working at this funeral home and she's feeling really good about it. And her boss is like, hey, you're doing a good job. I'm going to give you a raise. She goes home to her man. Jesse, I'm getting a raise. I'm feeling really good about everything. And he's like, you smell like formaldehyde. And she's like, I showered twice. I'm like, what, did you bathe in it or something? You're not going to come home smelling like that, especially if you showered once, not twice, and then you have to have a bath that smells like lavender to get it all. That's not how it works. It doesn't just like permeate into your clothing and into your skin. You're going to come home and you're going to smell like that all the time.
Yeah, that was, aside from my obvious content related issues with this episode, there was a couple of other things where I was just like, I don't know. It's like, I'm not associated with the funeral industry, but I at least knew that with the formaldehyde. I knew that's like, okay, if you're gonna be fine. Also, Jesse just sucks. He's just like bland and uninteresting. I am a lawyer going to save the day. It's like, great. I know like three things about you. One, you have like a daredevil level sense of smell. Two, you work as some like superstar lawyer and possibly in your own mind. And three, I guess you're just sort of like conventionally the good-looking dude that everybody sort of pictures on a Ryan Murphy show. So congratulations.
Yeah, I found it kind of strange when Sam was later talking to her friends, and she was kind of like, I think he's not okay with my job. And I was just like, well, how long have you two been together for? Because to be a funeral director and get your license and write the boards and do your practical exam, we're talking years. You can't just go into a funeral home and start embalming people. In California, you have to have a 4-year university degree with some mortuary school afterwards, or you have to have an apprenticeship where you have to then go and write your boards and get your license. This isn't a short process. So Jesse would have known about this. And even if he was with her from the beginning of it, where she's like, you know what? I think I want to get into this. Okay, you've been along for the ride for at least 5 years. So what, now all of a sudden you're going to be like, you need to shower. You smell like formaldehyde. Yeah. Get out.
Yeah, you know what? It's just like, you smell like lawyer. You need to go and shower. I don't like Jesse. I did not care about his character. I mean, granted, it's not exactly like Charlie was somebody worth rooting for either. This is a guy who like pulled some horrendous stunt in the morgue with his body.
I was glad though that they kind of touched on a few things in transfer service. So transfer service is someone who goes and retrieves someone's loved one from a hospital, a hospice, somebody's home, whatever. And then they bring it to the funeral home. So when he brought in this person's body and she's like, what are you doing here? You're not allowed to be in here. I was like, what? Where's he supposed to put this person? That is where you're supposed to put a body. It's cooler in the prep room. What is he supposed to leave them in the lobby? Like, I don't know why she was having that reaction. But later when she came outside and she saw that he was standing beside a coach, which you guys might know is a hearse. And my first reaction is like, why is he driving that here to drop somebody off? Because normally you use a van. And she made that same comment and was like, what's with the production? And he's kind of like, you know, driving around like a Kia van or whatever. It's not that great. I was like, that's cool. For someone like me, that's cool. I was like, it's nice that they put the details in.
I appreciate the effort that they put into, I think, trying to at least make certain parts of this feel accurate. However, insert record scratch here. You guys made all this effort to try to at least show certain elements of accuracy of the funeral industry, and then you have Charlie not only find a way to record, let's call this event that happens in the morgue when you don't own this building. Like, I don't know how you have access to all this stuff, but then you also manage to magically find a way to, like, edit together Jesse's video. I'm pretty sure this was not some live stream that you came up on in the middle of. He probably, like, went home, like, put this on, like, Premiere Pro and, like, put it together. It's like, how did you get this in there so that nobody would notice? And then all of us, it's like, for all the time you put into this, the wedding part of this made zero sense whatsoever and feels impossible.
No, this made no sense. So after she does what she does in the morgue with Charlie, and he later is like, oh, I just wore prosthetics and, you know, whatever, you know, but you still did this and we're both weird, so we should be together. I'm like, what? I was like, that's your reasoning for it? You've, like, psychologically ruined this woman. Like, she already went through this traumatic experience with her mom and everything that happened with her mom getting killed and that she was left for 3 days and all of that happened to her. It's like he's trying to then add on top of it, like, she never would have done something like this. It was sort of like it felt like he was pulling at her to be like, oh, I wanted to see your reaction. I didn't expect it to go there, but, you know, I'm triggering you to trigger you to see what happens and see where we are. I'm just like, this is a very weak reasoning for this. And then after all this happens, it's like a 2-month time jump where Charlie is nowhere to be seen. I was like, wouldn't he be trying to get back together with her or trying to get with her or calling her or hounding her before he would go to this extreme to ruin her life? Because now she's on, like, a registration list. She can't work anywhere. Her whole life is ruined. I'm just like, this is so extreme.
Everything about it is extreme. Everything is weird. Like, the whole culmination of all this is super weird, where it's just like, okay, you ruined everything that I had. You took everything from me. I am here to now kill you. And he is basically like, no, don't. And then she's like, okay. And then they end up falling into the grave, like making out while they're dumping dirt on them.
Yeah, and I mean, they sort of set that up when they were talking about the history of sort of funeral service and death and different rituals in funerals and all that type of stuff all over the world. And they mentioned that one funeral or thing that had happened where the husband had died and the wife buried herself alive with him so they could be together all eternity. So I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting that they brought that up. This is probably where they're going something weird with this. But it was so extreme. And then it was also like, okay, this video ruined her life.
Yeah.
But you are still working in the funeral industry and you are still working at the cemeteries. That would never happen. You would absolutely be just completely blackballed from working in funeral service. No one, I've seen people get blackballed from the funeral service for less of a prank than that. To pretend that you're dead on a table. You would get fired. Even if nothing else happened, if you were doing something like this, I've worked at a couple funeral homes, they would absolutely be like, you're done. We can't have that because, I mean, especially in the prep room, it's very clean and we do our best to keep it as clean as possible, but you can't be screwing around.
I think it's just, this is the real, if I'm just taking personal taste out of this, where it's just like, this episode is 1,000,000% not for me, you know, too weird, too shocking, but it's just beyond all that. This episode seemed to be constructed solely for the purpose of, how can we freak people out the most? What's the most shocking outcome that we can come up with that will leave people remembering this episode? And I guess congratulations, guys. I'm going to remember this regardless of whether I want to, but you didn't actually do enough to get to that point where it's like structurally it actually makes some sense. Instead, it's just like, let's just throw some weird you know what at the wall. People will just probably spend so much time being shocked they don't actually think about it.
Yeah, I've noticed the theme for this season feels to be a little more gross out than it is like typical horror. Like there's, the milkmaids, like there's a little more gross out factor to this season than anything else.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them props with this episode for at least swinging for the fences to do something very different than a lot of the other stuff that they did last season and this season. This isn't a story that I thought that they would touch on. This isn't a subject that very many films or TV shows or anyone will touch because in general, death is very sort of not something that you talk about. This very specific thing that happened, it's almost never touched on. So, I'll give some props. It is definitely horror and horrible to watch.
Yeah.
So, good for you for trying something new. I mean, I liked it a lot better and I like Drive. We've seen that a million times.
You're putting me in a real prisoner's dilemma here as to which one of these two I would rather watch. Where it's like,
Drive. That's 100 times. Drive was just so bad. It was so bad.
At least I forgot about Drive. Like, this is going to haunt me for a very long time.
Then it's done its job.
Stay away from the drugs, everybody.
All right.
We're gonna dial this up. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Can we just have a slasher episode next week? I don't know. Give us some more traditional horror, please. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you here next time.